Everyone likes a good love song. Everyone needs a good love song at some point in their lives. Thankfully, the Beatles gave us some truly great ones. But compiling an album containing the best of them is a real challenge. I'm Andrew from Parlogram Auctions, and welcome to the Beatles Love Songs. Riding high on the success of the Rock and Roll Music and Live at the Hollywood Bowl albums, Capitol, to quote one of their executives, went swinging for the bleacher seats to make an album with 25 mushy tunes that Grandma would love. Although there were a lot of happy grannies that Christmas, Beatles fans saw this album as little more than a cash grab in a fancy package. The end of the Beatles' contract with EMI and Capitol in January 1976 had given them license to milk the existing Beatles catalogue as much as they liked. As with Rock and Roll Music and Live at the Hollywood Bowl, it was Capitol and not EMI who were the driving force behind the Love Songs package. Selecting tracks for this album can't have been easy, and there are for me some odd choices on here, but I'll talk more about that later and tell you which ones I'd change. Having finalised the track listing, the task of selecting and preparing the tapes could begin. With more of an eye on profit than product, Capitol decided to use the tapes they already possessed, rather than order up fresh copies from London. Although that saved them a lot of time and effort, and more importantly money, it didn't do anything for the sound quality. However, having learnt from George Martin's work on Rock and Roll Music, they did make an effort to address some of the stereo separation issues by rebalancing or repanning them. For example, the vocal channels on some of the more extreme examples, such as Girl and Norwegian Wood, were narrowed slightly so they appeared more central in the stereo image. However, contrary to popular belief, both Yes It Is and This Boy appeared in simulated stereo. Fans would have to wait until the release of the Heineken cassette in 1986 for a true stereo version of Yes It Is, and This Boy didn't appear in true stereo until Past Masters Volume 1 in October 1988. The original twin-track stereo mix of P.S. I Love You was of course long gone, having been junked in 1963. Given all the fuss EMI had made about using their original masters for the Rock and Roll Music album, it's surprising that they caved in and used a dub of Capitol's master tape for their pressing, as did the normally sound quality conscious Germans. The tapes Capitol used were a long way from first generation, and the audio quality of this, and indeed all pressings I've heard, is underwhelming at best. But as the Capitol pressing was cut from the master tape, it's the best of a bad bunch. The US album, and the German copy by the way, presented the album with sides 1 and 4 on disc 1, and sides 2 and 3 on disc 2. The idea of presenting the discs in this way was to facilitate play on systems with a changer, which were a feature of fairly low-end machines, the type Granny would have, on which LPs were stacked so that when one finished playing, the next would drop down. When all were done playing, you just flipped the stack and were ready to play the remaining sides in the correct order. Whereas the UK and many other examples presented the album in the more traditional way of sides 1 and 2 on disc 1 and sides 3 and 4 on disc 2. Although the sound quality may be second-rate, the original packaging certainly isn't, and is for me the most interesting and attractive aspect of this release. Mindful of the mauling the cover of the Rock and Roll Music had received by none other than John Lennon himself, Capitol pulled out all the stops to make this one of their best-looking packages, well, in the US anyway. Once again, Roy Kahara took charge of art direction, but the design this time was handled by Capitol's in-house designer Kenneth Anderson. The outer panels of this stylish gatefold cover had a textured, simulated leather finish, with the central portrait panel and rear track listing pressed in gold-coloured foil. Unfortunately, the UK and most other countries did away with the textured finish and replaced the foil with print. The French even reversed the image on their version, whilst Bulgaria went for a different colour scheme altogether. Art director Anderson's idea for the gatefold was to use the so-called Mount Rushmore portraits taken by photographer Richard Avedon on August 11, 1967. The Beatles and Avdon had first crossed paths in January 1965 at the Ad Lib Club in London. Shortly after that meeting, Avdon shot a portrait of Ringo dressed as a Roman emperor, and Paul in an astronaut suit with added Gene Shrimpton. In the original 1967 Mount Rushmore collage, Ringo was featured front and centre, but Anderson wanted to put Paul in the foreground, because he was, after all, the only Beatle still connected to Capitol at the time. Anderson managed to convince Avdon into rebuilding the collage, and with a little airbrush retouching, remember no Photoshop in those days, the new collage became both the logo and the inner gatefold for the album. It's really one of my favourite images of the Beatles. The photos of Paul and John in particular have a real timeless quality to them. The classy leather look cover was created by Anderson using a piece of tan textured cover stock, which he sprayed with burnt sienna and burnt umber paint on the asphalt of the Capitol Records parking lot. The opulence continued inside, with an 11 by 11 inch 28-page booklet with simulated parchment paper and calligraphy-style lyrics by Michael Manoogian. The inner sleeves also utilised the same paper, onto which were printed the cover logo, track listings and album credits. But penny-pinching EMI thought this was over the top, and the UK edition came without a booklet and plain EMI inners. In Germany, to avoid confusion about the album's contents, their edition added the wording, in English oddly, a classic collection of previously released Beatles love songs. It revised the rear panel design too. The album was released in the US on the 21st of October 1977, but didn't appear in the UK until November the 19th. Despite remaining on the Billboard charts for 31 weeks and selling 3 million units, it became the first Beatles Capitol album to miss the top 10, peaking only at number 24. It fared a little better in the UK, reaching number 17, but could only manage a paltry 7 weeks on the chart, which was a bit of a fail by Beatles standards. And that wasn't surprising, because to most Beatles fans it just seemed like another lazy cash grab compilation. Apart from that, with 3 sides containing 6 tracks each and just one with 7, buyers felt a bit short-changed. After all, rock and roll music had at least managed 28 tracks. It's not as if they were short of choices. Talking of choices, for me there are some tracks which I think are out of place on this album, mainly because they are what I class as ballads rather than love songs. So just for fun, here are my suggestions of what I'd replace on this album. Although Yesterday is a great song, it's a bit of a downer as far as an opener goes. Instead, I'd replace it with All My Loving, which sets a much more positive tone. I'd then ditch I'll Follow the Sun and replace it with Ask Me Why. I think it's one of Lennon's best early songs and quite complex musically for 1963. If you're unconvinced, take a listen to the dry version on the original UK 45. The weak link for me on side 2 is Tell Me What You See, which I'd replace with 8 Days a Week. Love songs don't always have to be gloomy affairs, and this song would really lift the record. On side 3, I'd throw out You're Gonna Lose That Girl, For No One and She's Leaving Home, and replace them with Any Time at All, Things We Said Today and When I'm 64. On side 4, I'd replace The Long and Winding Road with No Reply, and then exchange Norwegian Wood for Don't Let Me Down, before finishing the album with Yesterday. Ideally, I'd add Real Love as a bonus, but let me know in the comments which ones you'd change. Although the album was a disappointment sales-wise, it remained on the catalogue until it was quietly deleted in the late 1980s. However, if you're a collector, there are some versions which are worth getting hold of. Capitol originally planned to release a single from the album, which was going to be Girl, backed with You're Gonna Lose That Girl. However, it was cancelled at an early stage, but not before some labels and picture sleeves had been printed. But some of the sleeves leaked out, and bootleggers even managed to get hold of Capitol stampers, producing black, blue, yellow, red and clear vinyl versions of the 45. Capitol Canada produced this prototype gold splatter version, before settling on a plain gold vinyl edition, which I remember being available as an import in the UK in 1978. Another related collectible worth looking out for are the original shipping boxes used to send copies to the stores, along with this original advertising poster. This UK 8-track was the final new Beatles 8-track released in the UK, and is, unlike the US edition, extremely difficult to find. For a time in the 1980s, love songs shared the racks with a similar compilation called Beatles Ballads. Released in November 1980, this was a kind of budget version of love songs, and even duplicated 10 of that album's tracks. Despite John Patrick Burns' fine cover art, which was once considered as a candidate for what became the White Album, Ballads fared even worse than love songs, limping only to number 17 in the UK charts during that fateful December of 1980. But the nadir of Capitol's compilation capers came in 1982 with Real Music. Although an interesting package with a decent booklet, it was a flawed album, and sales weren't helped by its odd cover art, and the non-inclusion of the movie medley single which had been used to promote it. Real Music is the only one of these compilations I actually bought, and that was on cassette from my newly acquired Walkman. So what do you think about love songs, and what would your track listing be? Let me and everyone else know in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this look at this album and that you'll subscribe if you'd like to see some more. Meantime, why not visit our website parallogramauctions.com. We'll be adding more stock in the coming weeks, so if you don't see what you're looking for, do get in touch and I'm sure we can find it for you. I'll be back with more stories and reviews very soon. But that's all for this one, so I'll say bye for now and thanks for watching. I'm not doing it again. I'm not doing that again. That was quite hard.